My name is Lazarus Black, and welcome back to Whispers in the Well. My first video, it was an introduction to what this channel will be about, and in this video, I'm going to be answering a few questions. Now, these are primarily questions from Christians that I got off of Facebook on my page, Lazarus Black, from friends of mine. Now, some of these questions are a little standoffish, so I decided to keep everyone anonymous because at the end of the day, most of these people who ask standoff questions do not realize that it is being standoffish, especially if they come from a very heavily traditional Christian background or a fundamental background. So, without further ado, let's just hop right in. The first question I have is, do you view yourselves as gods or goddesses? Absolutely not. We do not see ourselves as equal to the gods or goddesses. Much like Christians, we are here to worship, or in some cases just placate, the gods or goddesses that we venerate. Now, do we believe that human beings could become gods or goddesses? Absolutely. There's actually the story of Freyr, who was the first king of Norway and is now associated with summer, rain, and is considered to be in very close relation with goddess Freya. Now, Snorri Sturluson posited that all the gods began as humans. Most heathens reject this claim, along with a lot of the things that Sturluson says, simply because he was a Christian historian writing about pagan Europe. And you can read in the Prose Edda that a lot of the things that he says are very heavily Christian influenced. So no, we don't see ourselves as gods or goddesses. But in some very rare and very specific cases, a human being can elevate themselves in life to be a god or a goddess. Second question. And this is one of the standoff questions. Someone had the nerve to ask me, how does it feel knowing that you are going to hell? Now, this is something I struggled with very much when I left Christianity, because one of my biggest issues was letting go of the idea that if I'm wrong, I'm going to burn for all eternity in some fiery landscape. I don't believe in hell. Therefore, I don't fear it anymore. I believe in many afterlives. I actually believe that most afterlives do exist. I believe all afterlives exist. But when I see hell in the Christian sense, not in the Norse sense, when I see hell in the Christian sense, I view it not as a fiery landscape, but simply as a separation from God. So those who do not follow God are separated from God in the Christian sense. Usually you'll hear me call him Yahweh or Jehovah or one of the other many names that he's been assigned over the millennia. But that is simply my way of positing a difference between the Christian God and the many other gods of the world. So, do I feel bad knowing that I'm going to hell in the sense that I believe? No. No, I am perfectly fine with it. I have studied what heaven seems to be, and it does not seem to be the place for me. It is something that I believe exists, but in terms of hell, with fire and brimstone, I do not believe that that is the way it is. And all of my afterlives are a separation from Yahweh. So I am more than happy to accept the fact that I will be separated from Yahweh at my death. And I will sit in one of the many afterlives, which we'll get to those in another question. Alright, so someone asked me to explain my necklaces and the connection to my faith. Now, the main one that most people will notice is the Mjolnir. Now, I have a couple of different ones of these, and if you've been to any of my wrestling shows, you've seen me wear it. I've almost made a ceremony out of taking it off in the ring and hanging it around the ring post. During the Christianization of Scandinavia during the 10th and 11th centuries, Norsemen began wearing hammers. Now, this was their way of standing against Christianity and identifying themselves as pagans. When they would identify themselves as pagans, it was a symbol of pride to them. Now, we don't view pride as a sin. As a matter of fact, we view pride as something that's very important to have. So when we identify ourselves as heathen, in the modern sense of us wearing this necklace, it is a sense of pride that we are not ashamed, that we refuse to hide in the broom closet, that the Christians did not wipe out our faith, and we will continue to wear them as a symbol of our allegiance. Now, obviously, anyone who knows anything about Norse mythology or has even seen a Marvel movie, they know that the hammer is very heavily associated with Thor. While yes, the hammer is Thor's symbol, and the main reason that we wear it here on Midgard is because Thor is the protector of Midgard and the god of the hearth, we also wear it simply as a symbol of our faith. It might be a little bit more confusing if people were walking around wearing spearheads as a symbol of Odin, or wearing any other symbol that is not as instantaneously recognizable as the hammer. As I said in my first video, I'm a practicing witch. This is my pentacle, which is usually placed with Celtic symbolism. It's also a symbol of the four elements: earth, air, water, and fire, alongside spirit, which is placed at the top. Now mine, I've blessed, and I've placed my intention into it, which allows me to feel protected while wearing it, and I feel that it keeps me protected, much like a person would carry around a lucky rabbit's foot or put on their lucky socks at the beginning of the day. This is my personal protection that I wear every day. I also wear my hammer that I have put my intention into as a symbol of protection in another form of pentacle. The next question is, someone asked if I have any proof of my gods and goddesses. When you look at proof of religion, obviously the burden of proof falls on the person who is positing that a religion is true. Now, while I don't posit that my religion is the only religion, I do believe that it is true. So let's look at the three types of ways of verifying it to yourself. There are three classifications of personal gnosis. There is unverified personal gnosis, or UPG, shared verified personal gnosis, or SPG, and verified personal gnosis, which is VPG. Now, unverified personal gnosis would be if I was to sit during a ritual or pray and get a result that I feel is a sign from the gods, but I am by myself, no one else was there with me, and no one else felt it at that moment. That is unverified personal gnosis. When you get into shared personal gnosis, take that same experience and say that I shared it with a fellow heathen friend of mine, and they felt a similar thing doing a similar ritual to the same deity. That can be classified as shared personal gnosis because we have both had a similar experience by doing the same thing with the same deity. When you get into verified personal gnosis, obviously we are not talking about facts, because it is impossible to prove things that are not natural, at least at this moment. Just as Christians cannot obscenely prove the justice, just as Christians cannot clearly prove the existence of their God, but use personal, shared, and verified experience as a way of proving it to themselves. We use verified personal gnosis by going into the myths and sagas and researching and seeing that the deities are associated with things like this. Like, for instance, if I were to give an offering to Odin of whiskey and give an offering to Odin of steak a week later, and Odin responds better to the whiskey than to the steak, then I can verify that by looking in the myths and seeing that Odin does not eat, but prefers a strong drink. This is my way of verifying it to myself. I do not worry about verifying it to other people, but simply that my own personal experience is enough to justify something for me. Just in the same way that as a Christian, my own personal experience during prayer or during a time of worship was a way to justify the Christian God to me. The next question is, what caused you to leave Christianity? Well, that is a hard topic to get into because there was not really anything in specific. Most people attribute it to abuse in the church or overly fundamental views or anything like that, and it really wasn't that way for me. While, yes, I grew up around fundamentally religious people, they were never quite as harsh with me as I've heard stories of the church being with other people. For me, it was more so that I read through the Bible as a way of trying to verify myself as a Christian almost. I wanted to challenge my own beliefs, and I found my beliefs to be lacking. So I found other paths which went through multiple different faiths and multiple different religions. And then in the end, I heard the call of the Norse gods. I gave offering. I felt the experience. And here we are today as a heathen. So it wasn't really a political reason. It wasn't an abusive reason. I am still close with some of my family that came from the fundamental Christian church and are still in the fundamental Christian church. So it wasn't an abuse thing. It wasn't a, I hated the church, therefore I hated God. It was the fact that I found strong moral disagreements with some of the things that were in the Bible, and I couldn't, in all good conscience, worship and venerate a deity that I could not agree with, especially as a member of the LGBTQ community, as a practicing witch, as someone who does not agree with things like homophobia, bigotry, slavery, child abuse, and even things like putting a bear down on earth to eat children who called a man bald. These are things that I could not agree with, and therefore I moved to principles that I could more easily agree with. And I found that in heathenry. The same person who's asked a couple of these questions also asked, do you believe in actual manifesting beings? Of course I do. There is a sect of heathenry and most paganism, for example, called Atheo-Paganism. These are people who believe that the deities are not actual manifesting beings, but are simply archetypes that have been put out by society as good character traits to have. For me personally, I do believe the gods exist, hence why I have an altar behind me. I sit here, I give my offerings, I give all of my time and effort sitting here, speaking with the gods, communing with the gods, seeking wisdom, seeking advice, hoping for protection. Yes, I do believe in the old gods, and I believe that they are very real. As a matter of fact, I would venture to say that my belief in Odin and Thor and Freya and Skadi and Ran and Hel, Loki, and all of these other deities would be just as strong as a Christian believing in their own God, or as a Muslim believing in Allah. These gods are very important to me, and I have seen these gods. And I know that there is this almost comical misunderstanding when it comes to paganism that we don't actually believe in the gods that we pray to, that we are doing it out of tradition, or that some people believe that we've been tricked by demons. These are not demons, these are deities. And just because some people cannot justify their existence based on their own holy books, that does not mean that our gods do not exist. Even in the Bible, it acknowledges the existence of other gods by saying things like, I will crush the gods of Egypt, or put no other gods before me. While yes, this does say that Yahweh is a jealous God, it does not say that he is the only God. So, I saw that as my own proof that other gods existed and began researching. The only gods that I felt truly connected to came from the Norse pantheon, although I have felt connected to deities from Celtic pantheons and some even from the Greek pantheon. I mostly venerate the Norse deities simply because those are the ones that I have had the strongest connection with, and I feel the most comfortable speaking to. So yes, once again, heathens do actually believe in the Norse gods. What do you think of the Marvel movies? I love them as movies, but I have big issues with the way that they portray certain deities. Deities like Thor, like Odin, like Loki, Hel, Thinner. There is a lot of things in the mythology that are completely different than things that are in the MCU or even the comic book canon. I'll get into that in a future video, but I'll just keep this answer short by saying I do love the movies, but it does get under my skin seeing just how badly they've strayed from the actual stories, which I believe are just as cool, if not cooler, than the way the Marvel Cinematic Universe portrayed Thor. Now this next one is a question I've been asked quite a few times, and it gets complicated. The question is, do you sacrifice animals? The answer is, I don't, personally. Are there heathens that do? Sure. Am I opposed to the idea of it? Not completely. But people don't understand the point of sacrificing an animal. I wouldn't go out and buy an animal just to sacrifice it, because that's not what a sacrifice is. When you sacrifice an animal, you're not sacrificing the blood of that animal like so many people think. What you're actually doing is you are a farmer sacrificing livestock that could have reproduced to make you money. You are sacrificing the income that you stood to make off of breeding that animal or off of using that cow to plow your fields. So, do I sacrifice animals? No. But this question was actually among a couple of other standoffish questions, some of which I'm not even going to read on here, because I don't feel like giving those a platform. So what I assume this person was suggesting is that I sacrifice animals as a way of worshiping some form of demon, since this person also assumed that I'm going to burn in hell. My religion is not the only religion that has sacrificed animals. Paganism is not the only style of faith that has sacrificed animals. Christianity, Islam, Hindi, every faith sacrificed animals or even humans at one point or another. So no, I don't. And just like most modern Christians don't. I am perfectly happy giving offerings that are meant to represent that. Do I burn a straw goat on Yule as a representation of sacrificing a goat to Thor? Sure. Do I give steak to Odin as an offering in a way of symbolizing that I would give a cow to him if I had it? Sure. But does that mean that I would go out and buy an animal simply to sacrifice it to a deity? No. At the end of the day, I have a pet. I have a cat. And I love this cat very dearly. And just like any animal that I buy, I form a relationship with those animals. And those animals form a bond of trust with me. So I could not see myself sacrificing an animal that was not simply livestock, that was going to be farmed off. I know this is not the answer that most people were expecting. Most people were expecting that I would simply condemn animal sacrifice and move on. But I don't condemn it, because every practice is different. And a farmer sacrificing a cow to Odin or to Thor in hopes that their crops would grow and that their harvest would be plentiful is far different than some edgy teenager sacrificing cats in his basement trying to raise the devil. The intention is not only different, the act itself is different. Back to some easier questions, and actually this is a question I kind of appreciate. These are people who ask questions like this who are genuinely curious, who are not here to condemn me for my beliefs, but are genuinely curious and want to learn more about my faith and paganism in general. The question is, what is the difference between Wicca and paganism? Now, I can already hear it that some of my pagan friends who are watching this video are laughing right now, because this person does not understand that Wicca is part of the neo-pagan movement. Wicca was started in the 40s by a man named Gerald Gardner. It was a form of paganism that combined Celtic, Greek, and some even Native American traditions into a modern faith. Now, this faith is highly controversial, mainly because of people like Gerald Gardner, who was a horrible person, which I might get into in a future video. But Wicca is part of paganism. Paganism is a usually nature-based, almost always polytheistic faith where we venerate not only our gods, but also spirits and our ancestors. We view them all as different parts of the same set of beings that we should venerate, that we should go to advice. So yes, Wicca is paganism, but not all paganism is Wicca. It's kind of like the square and rectangle thing. I saved this question for last, because this one gives me a headache. These are the kind of people that give heathens a bad name. Not the person who asked this question, but the kind of people who actually believe this. Are you going to Valhalla? No, I'm not. I'm not a soldier. I'm not a warrior. Even if I were to die in the wrestling ring, I would not go to Valhalla. That is not how this works. To get into Valhalla, you must die a warrior's death in the heat of battle and die honorably. And even then, you might not make it there. It's up to the Valkyrie, who are led by Froya, to come down and get you. And if they don't take you to Folkvanger, which is another afterlife that we don't know much about, but what we do know is that Froya gets a first, I believe it's a third, of the soldiers who fall on the battlefield. She takes the first third to her hall, Folkvanger, which we don't know much about, but judging by Froya being associated with wealth and happiness, we can assume that it's a more calm version of Valhalla, I guess, where the soldiers can rest. As for Valhalla, not everyone would want to go to Valhalla, because at the end of the day, all you do there is you eat, you fight, you die. You eat, you fight, you die. Now, for a born warrior, this sounds like heaven. This sounds like an amazing life for them, to be able to sit there and eat, fight, and die on repeat until the days of Ragnarok, where they will fight against Loki's children and all of the other enemies that will come forth to try to dethrone the gods. I'm not going to Valhalla. And unless you are in the military, actively fighting, you are not going to Valhalla either. This is completely fine. Not everyone is made to go there. and people should be happy that they don't go there. But there are multiple other afterlives. There is also the Hellheim. The Hellheim is where most people will end up going. And I know you hear the first part of that, hell, and it terrifies the latent Christian inside of you. But actually, the Hellheim isn't that bad. See, Hel is one of Loki's children who was born from a mother giant. And she is half dead. Her brothers are Fenrir the Wolf and Jormungandr, the World Serpent. Now, when Odin had all of these children brought before him, he released Jormungandr into the sea. Fenrir was taken away by Tyr, the god of war and of justice. And Hel, who was only a small child at the time, he realized that she was half dead. And I don't mean that in a colloquial sense. I mean that half of her body was dead and decaying. That's another reason I wasn't very happy with the depiction in the Marvel movies. It would have been a much cooler visual to have Hel be mythologically accurate. But I digress. So, Odin found that she trusted the dead more than the living because she had been betrayed by everyone around her. So, Odin made her matron of the dead and sent her to the Hellheim, where she would watch over and take care of the dead. Now one day, this will include the gods, where she will take care of them. Baldur is already in the Hellheim, where she takes care of him, and she will take care of all of us, where we will go down and we will feast with our ancestors. And when Ragnarok comes, it will be a reset button, where some of us believe that we will live again, where others, like myself, believe that we are going to Hellheim to be prepared for a time, and then when we are ready, we are sent back to this earth. So yes, I personally also believe in reincarnation. As for the other afterlives, you have the Halls of Ron, which are also called the Coral Halls. Now, these are halls of the sea god, Ron, who takes the people who die in shipwreck and he brings them to his hall. This is another one that not really much is known about other than sailors who die at sea end up there. You also have the Niflheim. Now the Niflheim is one of the worst places that you can go, because this is where forgotten spirits go. People in the old Scandinavian world believed that your reputation is everything, especially after you die. In the Havmal, it actually says, men die, cattle die, but the one thing that does not die is the reputation that he has earned while living. So, as you can see, reputation was extremely important. This is also where the idea of a man dies two deaths, once when he takes his last breath, and once the last time someone speaks his name. Forgotten souls go to the Niflheim, where their spirits fade away into mist, no longer existing. That's why some people believe that it is the second worst afterlife that you can go to. Personally, what I believe. Now, Thor also has his own afterlife. We don't have a nailed down name of it, but most people would just call it Thor's Hall, which Thor's Hall. And this is where Thor will take a part of the dead that is slaves or farmers or thralls, and he brings them to him because those are his people. Thor is the god of the lower to middle class and to the slaves. He takes care of those who are not filthy rich, who did not have every commodity in life. And in death, he takes a third and cares for them in his own hall. Now finally, we have one more afterlife that is probably the closest you can get to the idea of hell in a Christian sense, as a bad place that you'll be tormented and stuff. We have Nastrond. Nastrond is a terrifying sounding place. Now, this was a place specifically made for rapists, adulterers, child molesters, murderers, and oath breakers. Now, the fact that oath breakers are tied into all of these people should show you how seriously the Norsemen took oaths. In my life, I've only taken 2 oaths. One that it was already fulfilled, and one that I will spend the rest of my life fulfilling. And I am completely happy with that oath, and do not intend on breaking it. Now, in Nastrond, there is a creature called Nidhogr, and he eats the dead repeatedly. These are called the corpse shores, where the dead lay on these shores, and in this cave that is around them, that is covered in poisonous snakes. It is similar, if not the same cave that Loki was trapped in after murdering Balder. So, venomous snakes cover the ceilings and walls. Their venom drips down on the people, and it tortures them, and they feel a lot of pain because of this. And then Nidhogr crunches down on the dead with giant jaws. It is a terrifying visual that I am completely happy that I am not going to go there, because I have not broken any oaths. I will not break an oath, and I am not one of the horrible people that end up there without breaking oaths. Now, there are a couple of more questions, but these are questions that I feel that could use their own video. I actually talked about some of them in here, but for the most part, these are going to become future videos because I can't explain them in a short format, and I don't want this video to be 3.5 hours long while I explain 3 topics that could take me 30 minutes a piece to do. So, if you enjoyed this, go ahead, click the subscribe button, and subscribe to Whispers in the Well, where a heathen talks about heathen things. I don't know what my next video is going to be about. It'll probably be somewhere in the realm of my journey out of Christianity in a more in-depth thing, and how I got past latent Christianity, because I know that's something that a lot of pagans and even atheists struggle with when they leave Christianity. So, if you want to see that video, subscribe, click the like button, comment down, and ask me any other questions. I'll probably go down there and answer some questions in the comment. It'll be a little bit longer because it's easier to format longer answers when I'm typing it out and I have time to think about it and I have my resources right next to me. Unlike right now, most of my resources are online and I use my phone to film these videos. So I'm kind of doing all of this off the top of my head and the little bit of notes that I was able to take right before I filmed this. So guys, stick around, because next week it's going to be an interesting topic talking about latent Christianity. I'll see you next time.